guys, let's talk about Chapter 5 on the requirements of ISO 17025-2017. What ISO 17025-2017 is about? It is a general requirements for the competence of testing and calibration laboratories. This standard specifies the general guidelines for the competence, impartiality, and consistent operation of laboratories. Laboratory is defined as a body that performs one or more of the following activities: calibration, testing, and sampling associated with subsequent calibration and testing. In ISO 17025-2017, there is a term called decision rule, which means the rule that describes how measurement uncertainty is accounted for when stating conformity with a specified requirement. In this chapter, we will only focus on the clause that is not covered in ISO 9001-2015, Chapter 1 until 4, such as resources requirements, which have been discussed in Clause 7, support, process requirements, which is similar to Clause 8, operation, as well as risk-based thinking. Let's start with Clause 4, General Requirement, which highlight the impartiality. The definition of impartiality in ISO IEC 17025-2017 is the presence of objectivity, and it is further clarified in a note saying that objectivity means that conflict of interest do not exist or are resolved so as not to adversely influence subsequent activities of the laboratory. In the context of testing or calibration laboratories, lab results cannot be influenced or have the appearance of being influenced by any relationships the laboratory or the people involved in laboratory activities may have with a client. Laboratory activities also cannot be influenced by any undue pressure being put on the people involved in conducting those laboratory activities. In order to safeguard impartiality, laboratory shall establish structure, mitigate pressures, identify and manage risk on an ongoing basis. Risk may come from its activities, its relationship, the relationship of its personnel. The lab should also demonstrate how to minimize or eliminate risk. It is recommended to write down risk may come from its activities, its relationship, and also the relationship of its personnel. The labs should also demonstrate how to minimize or eliminate risk. It is recommended to write down a document in which, depending on the needs, the following steps should be included: analysis of potential impartiality, risk, including risk arising from the laboratory activities, its relationship, and the relationship of its personnel, measures to eliminate or minimize risk concerning impartiality, action plan, design and implement permanent actions, commitment of the laboratory to its integrity through the signature of a statement by the top management. This analysis should be reviewed at the management review and, if necessary, revised. Clause 5 on structural requirements. The laboratory is obliged to write down the range of activities. The range of activities doesn't include those activities that have been permanently subcontracted. Following the new ISO 9001-2015, requires adequate communication processes regarding the effectiveness of the management system. Clause 6.2 Personnel. The most prominent are the need to supervise and to monitor the personnel has been taken up. The need to assess the efficiency of training has been erased. It is required to define competence requirements for each function, not only managerial functions, but all of those that have an impact on the results of the laboratory. The most frequently used supervision monitoring methods for personnel are measuring samples, non-reference standards, inter-comparison samples, blind samples, inter- or intra-laboratory comparisons, and exam for intellectual knowledge. It is recommended to record these activities. Class 6.4 Equipment. Standards reference materials, reagents, and software are now also considered as equipment. Conditions to calibrate equipment are set if accuracy or uncertainty affect the validity of results, and if calibration is needed to establish metrological traceability. Next class is 6.5, Metrological Traceability. How to establish and demonstrate traceability? Through the use of a National Metrological Institute, NMI, or accredited calibration laboratory. However, if this is not possible, it is advisable to assess their competence based on ISO IEC 17025. Class 6.6 Externally Provided Product and Services. The laboratory should have a system to select, assess, monitor and reassess external providers. The laboratory shall ensure that all purchased products and services fulfill the requirements. The laboratory shall make the following clear to the provider: what is to be bought, acceptance criteria, personnel competence needed, and activities that the laboratory intends to perform in the provider's facilities. Clause 7.1 Review of requests, tenders, and contracts. The laboratory shall have a procedure for the review of requests, tenders, and contracts. The procedure shall ensure that the requirements are adequately defined, documented, and understood. The laboratory has the capability and resources to meet the requirements. Where external providers are used, the requirements of Clause 6.6 are applied, and the laboratory advises the customer of the specific laboratory activities to be performed by the external provider and gains the customer approval. It is recognized that externally provided laboratory activities can occur when the laboratory has the resources and competence to perform the activities. However, for unforeseen reasons, is unable to undertake this in part or full, the laboratory doesn't have the resources or competence to perform the activities, the appropriate methods or procedures are selected and are capable of meeting the customer requirements. For internal or routine customer reviews of requests, tenders, and contract can be performed in a simplified way. Clause 7.7 Ensuring the validity of results. The laboratory shall have a procedure where appropriate, but not be limited to, use of reference materials or quality control materials, use of alternative instrumentation that has been calibrated to provide traceable results, functional checks of measuring and testing equipment, use of check or working standards with control charts where applicable, intermediate checks on measuring equipments, replicate tests or calibration using the same or different methods, retesting or recalibration of written items, correlation of results for different characteristics of an item, review of reported results, intra-laboratory comparisons, and also testing of blind samples. Clause 7.8 Reporting of results. Common requirements for reports, test calibration or sampling. Each report shall include the information that will minimizing any possibility of misunderstanding or misuse. Clause 7.9 Complaint. The outcomes to be communicated shall be made, reviewed, and approved by individuals who is not involved in the original laboratory activities. Clause 8.1.2 of Management Requirements talk about Option A. As a minimum, the management system of the laboratory shall address all the management system documentation required from Clause 8.2 to 8.9 in ISO 17025-2017 standard. However, if they has established and maintains a management system in accordance with the requirements of ISO 9001-2015 and that is capable of supporting and demonstrating the consistent fulfillment of the requirements of clause 4 to 7 also fulfills at least the intent of the management system requirements specified in clause 8.2 to 8.9, the laboratory is subjected to option B of clause 8.1.3. These are the frequently asked questions about the two standards. If we already certified with ISO 9001-2015, do we still need to have ISO 17025-2017? Or, if we already certified with ISO 17025-2017, does it compulsory to have ISO 9001? The answer is conformity of the management system within which the laboratory operates to the requirements of ISO 9001 doesn't of itself demonstrate the competence of the laboratory to produce technically valid data and results. This is accomplished through compliance with clause 4 to 7 of ISO IEC 17025. Thus, it is recommended for the organization that has been certified with ISO 9001-2015 to have ISO 17025-2017. If the laboratory already certified with ISO 17025, it is not compulsory to be certified with ISO 9001. That's all for Chapter 5. Next e-lecture will be on the product and quality certification. See you. Bye. Please scan the QR code for your attendance.